إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. واشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى أهله ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، فإن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. We give praise and thanks to Almighty Allah. We ask Him to shower His blessing upon the noblest of mankind, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, we started taking the section on urud at-tijara. So because it was a little challenging to go through to respond to what we had learned on it, we just breeze through again. I'll ask us to go back to the videos and learn details about it. All the tijara are trade goods. Arada means to exhibit something. So the things that are physical and we can see, that are exhibit themselves, or we exhibit them, that are touchable, observable, these are urud. There are two types: urud al-qinya and urud at-tijara. Urud al-qinya are personal effects. Qinya is the act of possessing something. So if you possess, so this is the basis of things that can be owned. This is the basis. The basis of assets are that they are urud al-qinya until we decide to trade in them. Once we have the intention to trade in any of these items, any asset, then it becomes urud at-tijara. Urud at-tijara. Urud al-qinya, there is no zakat to be paid on them due to ijma of the scholars on that, based on the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, "Laysa ala al-Muslim fi farasihi wa abdihi zakat." That there is no zakat on a Muslim's horse and slave. These are personal effects of the Muslim, so he doesn't pay zakat on them. So because they are personal effects, the scholars, rahimahumullah, they extend it to other personal effects too. So we don't pay zakat on the clothes we wear, the shoes we wear, the cars we ride, and things like that, the houses that we live in. So there's no zakat to be paid on these. So based on this hadith, and also practices of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, that they were not known to have paid zakat on personal effects beyond horses and slaves. Once they were personal effects, they were not zakatable. So for the things that are zakatable, they are urud at-tijara. We went into evidences for that, the general evidences and the specific evidences. The general evidences, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu anfiqu min tayyibati ma kasabtum wa mimma akhrajna lakum min al-ard. O you who have believed, spend on the good things that Allah, that you have earned. And Imam Mujahid, Tabi'i, generation after the companions, he said, one of the leading mufassirun, he said that this refers to the things that we earn from tijara, or urud at-tijara. وَمِمَّا أَخْرَجْنَا لَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ, and the things that we bring out from that. That is of two prongs, the things that we sow as seeds and they grow and we get their produce. We know those that we pay zakah on from that based on the section on farm produce. We agreed on 4: 2 seed-like ones, 2 fruit-like ones. So dates, raisins being the fruit-like ones, and barley and wheat being the grain-like ones. Anything other than that is ikhtilaf amongst the scholars. So urud al-tijara, the part on it in this ayah, in general evidence, is وَمَا مَا كَسَبْ مِنْ طَيِّبَاتِ مَا كَسَبْتُمْ, from the good things that you have earned. Then we went into more specific ones. The hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he sent Umar bin Khattab to go and collect zakah, and he went, one of the people he went to was Khalid bin Walid. He came back and from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about three people who did not pay zakah. Khalid bin Walid was amongst them. Said, Mana'a ibn Khalid zakah, that Ibn Khalid prevented us from taking zakah from him. He didn't give us zakah. So Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Innakum tazlimuna Khalidan, that you people have oppressed Khalid by asking him, because he had waqafa zira'ahu wa i'tadahu fi sabilillah. He had donated the things that you saw to the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in jihad. So the things that you saw that you wanted to collect zakah on, they are already in trust, in an endowment for zakah. He was only taking care of those things. Now, the evidence in that is that Umar bin Khattab could not have asked Khalid bin Walid to pay zakah on those items if he thought that they were his personal effects, because we just said a short while ago that there is no zakah on personal effects based on the hadith, that there is no zakah on a Muslim's horse and slave. So they couldn't have thought that these things were personal effects. But the only explanation possible for asking him of that is that they thought that they were trade goods. I thought that they were trade goods. Perhaps you go to someone's house and you see a lot of cars there. You know, oftentimes when that happens, they are used for trade. Of course, there could be, many people are into just getting a lot of cars now, but that's not the usual thing. So if you see a lot of cars like that, then the first thing that comes to mind is that they are trade goods. So if Umar had thought that it was just for Khalid bin Walid, just getting a lot of horses because that was the in thing then, or anything like that, and they were his personal effects, he would not have asked for zakah on them because they were not zakah effects. So they were not zakatable. So the only explanation is that they were trade goods. Then we saw specific hadith from Umar bin Khattab where he asked people to pay zakah on their trade goods. Like the man who was selling leather items, and he told him to pay zakah. He said, it's only leather items I'm selling. He said, value what you're selling and pay 2.5% on it, rubu ushur. So that is why we pay. And also in logic, we said another evidence in logic, look at evidence in the Quran, evidence in the hadith, and those suffice. The evidence in logic is that we all agree that we pay zakah on gold and silver and currency. The original currency in Islam was gold and silver, dirham for silver, dinar for gold. That if people could put their gold and silver coins under their pillows and those things grow or double, multiply, then nobody will be engaged in trade. Nobody will be engaged in trade. It's stressful, it's risky. You can lose everything you invested in it. Nobody will be interested in trade. So trading is an excuse that people use in order to grow their wealth. What they need, what they want, what they go for, what they strive for is the currency itself, the silver coins, the gold coins. So therefore, it is like a receipt for those money. They take the money, they go to buy those items that they trade in, and they sell those items in exchange back for money at a higher, price, and their money will have grown. So if they didn't need the money, they wouldn't have sold it back. So, and this selling back and buying back happens, on and on and on and on, like that, sometimes within a day, several times. So the money is the main thing. So when we're talking urud al-tijara, we're actually talking about is money. So the zakah on it is the same as zakah on money, which is rubu' or shuk, a tenth of a quarter, 1/40, 2.5%. So with all that that we quickly went through, the Sheikh Rahmallah says we should go through some things in terms of shurut, conditions for payment of zakah on urud at-tijara. The conditions that must be present before the state can say, bring zakah, pay zakah on these urud at-tijara, these trade goods of yours. The conditions that must be present before a man sees that it is compulsory on him to pay zakah, man or woman. The first of them that we looked through last week is an-niyya, niyyatu at-tijara, the intention of tijara. We said the default with assets is that they are urud al-qiniyya. They are personal effects until we have the niyyah that this car is no longer a personal effect. It's going to be for sale. Or at the point of purchase, straight away, it is going to be for sale, not taking it as urud, as ard al-tijara. No. It's for as ard al-qiniyya, it's ard al-tijara. So you just take it like that from the start. Any which one. So something that is ard al-tijara today, that thing can, that same day, the next minute can become ard al-qiniyya, ard singular, urud plural. So I have a personal property, and I decide I want to use it as a taxi. I want to use it as a taxi. So it's no longer a personal effect. It becomes something that I'm investing. But the zakah, because I'm not selling the car itself, the zakah will be on what? The proceeds of the rentals. Then the following month, I decide I want to sell the car now. Then at that point, it becomes urud at-tijara. Becomes urud at-tijara. Then what I'll pay zakah on will be the value of the car itself. If I continue to use it for rentals while waiting to sell, then at the point of paying my zakah, the zakah will be on the price of the car and the accumulated rental price. And of course, that is if it took me 1 year from the time when I intended to sell it to the time when I actually sold it. If I sell it before 1 year, then I add the money to other, types of wealth that have been with me before that time. Or as I start counting a howl for that money itself, because, and that is the default actually, because it is not born as profit from a different capital. Profit from a particular capital, the howl for it is the howl of the capital that gave birth to it. But if I sell the house and I got money up to the nisab, then I start counting from that point in time when it reaches the nisab. Okay, Now, the following month, I sell a car and I get, money. If it is up to the nisab, then I start counting from the time when I sold that car and got that money for its own howl. If I decide that when I'm paying the zakah of on the wealth that reached the nisab that I got from sale of the house, I also want to do the zakah of the car at that point in time. No problem, it's permissible. We talked about that, but it's not compulsory on me to do that. What is compulsory on me is to set out each house. What if I sell the car and the process is not up to the nisab? Then there's no zakah on that portion of the wealth until it reaches the nisab. Now, because it's a trade good, that is, so I wait until, that it's what is called mal al-Mustafad, the money that one, earns. Okay, so an-niyya is the first thing, or all the tijara for something for you to pay zakah on an item, on an asset, then you have to have niyya about it. And we talked about how that niyya can move from place to place. The second one is an tablugha qimata urud litijara nisaban min aqali thamanain. It is that it should reach. What should reach? The qima, the price of the urud tijara. Tablughu nisaban. It should reach the nisab. Min aqali thamanain. It should reach the nisab of either gold or silver. Thaman is gold or silver, because they are used to set prices. The thaman of something is the price of something. So these gold and silver are also referred to as that, thaman. So it should reach the nisab of 55 grams of gold or the nisab of 595 grams of silver. The value, once you assess the value of your urud tijara and you compare and you look at the market value of gold or 35 grams of gold on that day, 1 year, on the day you're supposed to pay zakah, then that is what you do. And the price or the value of your products is not the value that you bought it. It is the selling price. That if I were to sell these items that I have in stock today, what will be the value? So it could be higher than the cost price to you. It could be the same. It could be lower. It depends on market forces. The third thing is al-hawl that you look into. Al-hawl. As 1 year passed, and that is because the Prophet ﷺ said, وَلَيْسَ فِي مَالِ زَكَاةٌ حَتَّى يَحُولُ عَلَيْهِ الْحَوْلُ. There's no zakah on money on wealth until 1 year has passed on it. That is on wealth that is zakatable until 1 year has passed over it. And this 1 year, it should not have, dipped. That's why the value of the trade goods should not have dipped below the nisab. So over here it says it should reach the nisab. Over here it says that you should, once that's reached the nisab, then you start counting. And 1 lunar calendar after that, that is a hawl, then you pay zakah. The Sheikh rahimahullah is telling over there, why يعتبر وجود النصاب في جميع الحول, that the nisab, that the value of the trade goods should be at or above the nisab, is a requirement that should be present throughout the hawl, throughout the lunar calendar. لأن ما اعتبر له الحول والنصاب اعتبر وجوده في جميعه الأثمان. So he said, just like money, when something has a conditions of reaching the nisab and being and one hawl, passing by before you pay the zakah, then it means that nisab must be attained for the entirety of the haul. Once it dips, then there's no zakat to pay on that. So we looked at that last week. Then we got to the 5th point. We'll continue from there today, inshallah. خامسا حول عروض التجارة لا ينقطع بمبادلة أو بيع. Now, last when we were treating the zakah on Sa'ima, Bahimatul An'am as-Sa'ima, animals of the sheep, cow, and sheep, cattle, and camel family. One of the things we mentioned is that when you have camels, for instance, species are called jins, okay, in Arabic. So if you trade one jins for another, a zakatable jins for another zakatable jins, both jins being at or above the nisab, then your haul becomes truncated. For instance, the Prophet ﷺ said, لَيْسَ فِي مَا دُونَ خَمْسَةِ دَوْدٍ صَدَقَةٍ. There is no zakah to be paid on less than 5 camels. So if I have 5 camels, and we also know that the zakah for sheep, the nisab rather, for sheep is 40. So if I trade 5 camels for 40 sheep, I've traded nisab of camel for nisab of sheep. So when is my haul going to be completed? Do I start counting from when I started counting when my camels reached 5? Or at the point of sale, the haul becomes truncated and I start counting anew, afresh for that of the sheep? The scholars differed on this. We looked at that. We can refer to the videos on that, but it suffices to say that the most correct opinion of the scholars is that the haul becomes truncated because there are 2 different species. Yet when you owned the camel, you were to pay zakah on camels. At the point of selling the camels, you no longer owned camels. So the haul is linked to what you want to pay zakah on. The haul is linked to, just like the nisab too, is linked to what you want to pay zakah on. If I own 85 grams, which is nisab now, of silver, 85 grams of silver, I haven't reached the nisab of silver. Yes, it is the nisab of gold. But if I have 85 grams of gold and I now sell it, and I sell it for 85 grams of silver, I won't say that the nisab continues. No, the nisab does not continue. Gold has its own nisab. Silver has its own nisab. Likewise, the haul is tied to what I'm paying zakah on. So once I sell the zakah and the camels, and the number remaining with me drops below the nisab. In this case, I have only 5 camels. If I had 10 and I sold 5, for instance, and I got 40 sheep, then the haul for camels has not been truncated because I still have 5 remnants, 5 camels still with me. So that haul will continue if I had 10 and sold 5. And with the 5 that I sold, I got 40 sheep. Then I'll start the counting of a new haul for the sheep. So I have 2 hauls now. One untruncated haul for the camel and a new haul for the 40 sheep that I just got. So that is what we said, which over there, that an important point that the scholars said. It says, so long as it is not firaran min al-zakah, that you didn't do that trade, you didn't execute that trade in order to run from zakah. The zakah man is coming tomorrow. It's not yet 1 howl. It's 1 howl minus 1 day. I will sell my camels and get sheep instead. So when the zakah man comes, I just got this sheep yesterday. But I went around expecting last weekend and saw camels. They're sold. They're sold. So you start counting this, today, and you come back next howl. So once you are not doing that, then it's permissible. Once you're doing that, trying to run, like trying to evade zakah, then it is still upon you. You still owe zakah on those camels that you try to evade paying zakah on. So that is the default. So whether you traded them or you exchanged them, it doesn't matter. It's that you're no longer with them and you got something else, in place of them. What you got in place of them may be something that is zakatable, it may be something that isn't zakatable. For instance, I sell, 5 camels that I own. I don't own more than that. And I got 2 elephants in exchange. Elephants are not zakatable. So there's no zakah, to be, paid anymore. The howl of the camels has been truncated, and what's replaced them, either by trade by barter or by buying and selling, is not up to, is not zakatable. So therefore, or the item is zakatable but hasn't reached the nisab. I sold 5 camels and got, 39 sheep in return. So the howl of the camel has been truncated, but the sheep are less than 40. So there's no howl yet to start counting until they reach 40. So that is the default. But over here, the Sheikh says, howl urud tijara la ينقطع بالمبادلة أو البيع. That the howl of urud at-tijara does not become truncated by exchanging your urud at-tijara or by buying or selling or trading in your urud at-tijara. Can somebody give a reason why the Sheikh will deviate from the default that we talked about just now, which I will give examples in sheep, camel, and all that? Why will this be the case that it doesn't apply in urud at-tijara? I sell my camel, I got sheep, I'm not evading zakah. There's no, we say that the most correct opinion of the scholars is that there's no zakah to be paid yet. My howl for the camel has been truncated. But he's saying it's not like that in the case of urud at-tijara. Why? Madam Ziyad. Madam Ziyad. Madam Isa.
Doctor, I can try.
Okay, please go ahead.
It's probably because the Urud Tijara, their valuation was based on gold and silver. So if that basis is not changed, it's that I guess that's the reason in my mind.
Barakallah fik. Barakallah fik. That is the answer. We said just at the beginning of the class that trade goods are excuses for growing money. We know we have our representative money and we have our fiat money. These things, the representative money, represented gold or silver coins that were stored somewhere. Then the quality of, representing a medium of trade that was inherent in gold and silver was now transferred to fiat money. That even though on its own it has little or no value on its own, but the quality that made gold and silver, or a part of the qualities that made gold and silver zakatable, was now moved to it, and that is the quality of being used to set prices the quality of being used to pay for items. Then trade goods serve a purpose of getting money and substituting money. You have money now, and I want to get higher amount of money. But if I just go to Malam Mujib, I say, I have 5 dirhams, give me 10 dirhams. You'll ask, do you want the extra 5 dirhams as a loan? And I say, no, I just want you to give me 5 dirhams in addition. He won't go for that. But if I say, what can I do? Okay, he likes dates. So I go to buy dates in the farm, and I'll say at 5 dirhams, and I say, these are fresh dates. Just got them from, from the farm. How much? 10 dirhams. He gives me 10 dirhams happily. So I've grown my wealth from 5 dirhams to 10 dirhams. So therefore, because representative money, fiat money, and all the tijara are all, in the same family of either representing or being excuses for money, then their nisab is the same. The amount you pay in zakat from them are the same. Therefore, also, they are of the same genes, generally speaking. So if I have a roda tijara and I exchange it for money, still the same thing. Because when I'm doing zakah, when I'm paying zakah on roda tijara at the end of the year, I will not only value that roda tijara, I will also add to it, to the value that I get, the money that I have in stock in the bank, the trading money that I have, from that business, from the tijara that I'm doing, and add it together and now know the total. So changing the tijara to money does not affect it. I'm selling pineapples, and I'll sell the pineapples and I buy mangoes. It doesn't change. Yes, the species, botanical species are different, but the species in fiqh are the same. They are under urud at-tijara. So selling them, trading them by barter does not alter the howl of urud at-tijara. The only thing that will change is if you change the niyyah. Okay, it is not longer, I'm not saying this business is not moving. I'm no longer interested in just pumping money to it and not getting anything out. I'm not doing, we have family members come and eat this thing and give our neighbors and give our friends, not doing the business again. In that case, it becomes urud al-qinya. It ceases to be urud at-tijara, and there's no zakat to be paid again if that decision was made before one howl was completed. Now, so he said, as an example, فَإِذَا اشْتَرَى عَرْضًا لِتِجَارَةٍ بِنَقْدٍ, if he bought a piece of land with money, أَوْ بَاعَهُ بِهِ, or he sells a piece of land and in exchange he got money. Either uses money to get a piece of land, or he sells a piece of land and he gets money. Bana ala hawl al-awwal. He would base his date of paying zakah, his measurement of one lunar calendar, hawl, on the first item. If he had money with him, we're not going to pay zakah on that. Okay, he now buys a piece of land that he's going to use for tijara. So that piece of land is ard at-tijara. So he is going to start counting his hawl from when his money that he had with him reached the nisab. Is parting with that money and getting a piece of land for tijara in exchange has not done anything to the hawl. Likewise, the converse. If he had a piece of land that was for tijara and the value was at or above the nisab, and he wants to get money now, there's no difference. It's for all the tijara. It's an excuse for money. So he's selling that piece of land for tijara in order to get money. Has no effect on the how. However, if the piece of land was qinya, then it will have an effect. Qinya, there's no proper, there was no zakah on it in the first place. If you own a piece of land, there was no zakah on it. If he now sells it and gets money, then he will start counting his howl from the time he gets that money. If that money is up to the nisab or above the nisab, and all other conditions are met. Now, so that is on that. Then the reverse is also, the same. If he had money that was zakatable, and before the howl was completed, he decided to buy land for personal use, then there's no zakah to be paid. The howl of the money becomes truncated at the point in time where he buys the land for personal use. Now, 6.6 ربح أرض التجارة حوله حول رأس ماله. Whatever anything gives birth to, whatever anything that is accountable gives birth to, the howl of the offspring is the howl of the parents. We treated that under Bahimatul An'am as-Sa'ima, farm animals of the sheep, cattle, and camel family. So if your cows reach 30 in number, that's the nisab. You start counting the howl. 1 day, 1 hour before the howl is completed, your cows, let's say 5 of your cows, of your 30 cows, give birth to 1 cow each. So that's 35. You're going to pay zakah on 35 cows because the howl of the offspring is the howl of the parents. But if 1 hour before paying zakah on those 30 cows, before the howl is completed, you get new supplies of 5 cows. Then those new supplies of 5 cows that are not given birth to by your 30 cows are going to start, you're going to start a new howl for those ones because they're separate properties. So the same thing applies to money. The same thing applies to money and urud at-tijara. For money, if you are collecting a salary and your salary is at or above the nisab, then each month's salary starts a new howl for itself. Because Muharram's salary is not what gave birth to Safar's salary. They are 2 independent things. You did work, you performed work in Muharram, you were paid for that. It's at or above the nisab. The same thing in Safar, at or above the nisab. So you start counting howl for each mal al-mustafad like that. An uncle died, or the parent died, and you got in your share of inheritance. It was at or above the nisab, is mal al-mustafad. You start counting its own howl separate. However, like we said, if you decide to pay the zakah on the wealth that are on different house at the time of the wealth that is earlier, whose house is attained earlier, then there's no problem with it. It is permissible. However, it is not compulsory on you to do so. So it is like that for money. However, if I have salary that I'm saving, I have salary that is below the nisab, and Muharram is below the nisab. Then I earn in Safar, and I add it to the one in Muharram. It now reaches the nisab. Then I start counting. Because they, jointly now they meet the nisab. Okay. So the following month, I get another salary. It starts its own independent howl. It starts its own independent howl. Now, so the same thing applies to urud at-tijara. The same thing applies to urud at-tijara. That if I am doing a business, I'm selling coffee, for instance, the profits that that coffee business generates is part of that coffee business. It's like the cows that gave birth to new cows. So when I'm about to pay zakah, I will value not only the coffee, but the but the profit also. Profit are like the offsprings in this case. So rubhu urud al-tijara hawluhu hawlu ra's al-mal. The profit of urud al-tijara have the same hawl as the capital. Now, so he gave an example. The Sheikh said, فَلَوْ مَلَكَ نِصَابًا مِنْ urud al-tijara. If he owns a nisab, the value of the nisab in urud al-tijara, وربح في قيمته والربح في قيمته, and he also owns profits of equivalent value, فإنه يزكي الجميع. He would pay zakah on both the value of the urud tijara and the profit. Now, Sabia. The 7th point said, تضام قيمة أنواع العروض التجارة بعضها إلى بعضها وإلى كل من ذهب والفضة في تكميل النصاب. We agree with the Sheikh up until here. Then we agree with him partly in the remaining part. Says rahimahullah, says تضام قيمة أنواع العروض التجارة إلى بعضها. Says the urud al-tijara, whether I'm selling shoes, I'm also selling shirts, I'm also selling trousers. There are different types. Trouser is not shirt. Shirt is not shoes. However, in fiqh, they are all under the same heading of urud al-tijara. So the value of shirts will be added to the value of shoes, will be added to the value of trousers. Not that I group shirts differently. No, they are all urud al-tijara. If I have camels, cattle, and sheep, and they are not sa'ima, free range, not walking, not for sale animals, but rather I am selling them, then I'm going to pay zakat on them as zakat urud al-tijara. I'm not going to look at their nisab and say, oh, 30 nisab, 30 is a nisab for cows. That is if they are sa'ima that are not meant for trade. I'm not going to look at camels and say 5 is the nisab. That is the nisab if they were non-working, free range, not for sale camels. I'm not going to look at the sheep and say 40 is their nisab. No, their nisab is going to be the nisab of whichever is attained first, the nisab of silver or the nisab of gold. That will be their nisab because they are urud at-tijara. I'm using them as excuse to grow my silver coins, my gold coins. So they are going to join them together. I value the camels along with the sheep, along with the cows. Whatever I get, add the profit that I've made if I have any profit, and that total is I'll pay 2.5% of it as zakah. Now, so we agree with the Sheikh up onto that. It says we add all this, everything in your store, whatever the species, whatever the type, so long as it is urud at-tijara. You don't add the desks, the AC, and all that because they are not part of urud at-tijara. You're not selling those ones. The carpets, the whatever, the lightning, the bulbs, no. They are not part of urud at-tijara. But the things that you're selling and buying, that you have in stock, then those are the ones that you value. You add the value of all of them together. Then what happens if I have cash, gold, and silver with me? We talked about that earlier. There's difference between among the scholars. Some of the scholars say you add all of them together. The more correct opinion of the scholars which you took then was that you can add, and you are to add, whatever you get from urud at-tijara, the value that you get from urud at-tijara plus the profits, you add it to the money that you have, and you add that total to the total value of either gold or silver that you have. Whether or not the gold and silver have reached the nisab or not. Once, if you add your urud tijara together and you add it to the money that you have and you add it to either gold or silver, it will reach the nisab, then it is zakatable. If you add all of them like that and it doesn't reach the nisab, then there's no zakat to pay. And it all goes back to the answer the Mala Mujib gave, which is that they are of the same general same general type. All still falls back to dinar and dirham, money, gold and silver coins. So the Sheikh Rahimahullah took the opinion that you add, if you have gold and silver, gold and, not gold or, gold and silver, you add that to money and urud at-tijara. So we say it is gold or silver that you add. That is the point of difference here, because the money and urud at-tijara, they represent either gold or silver. So you add them to either gold or silver. The nisab of gold is different from the nisab of silver. So you can't add them together, although some scholars say that. When we're talking about paying zakah on gold and silver, we took the position of some of the scholars that say that if you have half the nisab of gold and half the nisab of silver, then you have to pay zakah. This is a weak position, because what do you pay zakah on? You have half of 85 grams of gold, you have half of 595 grams of silver. What do you pay zakah on? And we also have hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said, if you have less than 200 dirham, there's no zakah on you. 200 dirhams is equivalent to 595 grams of silver. So this person has half or not up to the nisab, and you're asking him to pay. That is going against the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And Allahu A'lam. The 8th point, كيفية تقويم سلع عروض التجارة بما تبلغ قيمتها. How do you, assess or value rather your trade goods and know the value that it has attained? We've said that as we were talking. You just value based on the selling price on that day that your zakah is due, one hour. So you periodically value your stock, which is what all businesses do, so that you'll be able to know when it has reached the nisab. They start counting on a howl from that point in time. Then one howl after that, you have to pay zakah. On the day you have to pay zakah, the selling price of your goods, not the price that you bought them. The selling price on that day is the value that you're going to go with. and you pay 2.5% of that in zakah. تاسعا, 9th point. The Sheikh Rahimullah says, لا شيء في آلات التجارة التي لا يراد بيعها ولا لا يراد بيعها ولا في ما أعد للإجارة. There is no zakah on items, tools, appliances that you use for your trade, but you don't intend to sell them. So in your shop, you have AC. You use it to assist you in the shop. You won't be able to stay in the shop if the temperature is not favorable for you being there. So you need an AC. You need chairs. You sit somewhere. You need a table. You need a table that you exhibit your wares on. Things like that. You're in a shop. You either bought or rented, the shop. All these things, you don't intend selling them. So you're not going to pay zakah on any of these things. You have an ice cream maker. You don't intend to sell the ice cream maker. You have a popcorn maker. You don't intend to sell the popcorn maker, but rather to sell popcorn, and with the ice cream maker to sell ice cream. So there's no zakah on the ice cream maker. There's no zakah on the popcorn maker until you change your intention and say you want to sell them. Then they become urud al-tijara. Prior to that, they are urud al-qinyan. You own them and you're using them for their services. Also, there's no zakah wala fi ma u'idda lil-ujra. And there is no zakah on whatever you dedicate to rentals. You have a house, you're not living in it, and you're not selling it. Rather, you have rented it out. There's no zakah on that house, but there's zakah on the proceeds of that house, the rent that you get. Once that rent, equals the nisab on its own, or gets above the nisab on its own, or if you add it, the money that you get from it, if you add it to other wealth that you have, everything now reaches the nisab. Then you then you pay zakah on it. Then you pay zakah on it. ولكن الزكاة في الأجرة إذا حال عليه الحول. The zakah that you pay is on the rental fee, that the rental income that you get. Let's skip all that. We've summarized everything. عاشرا, 10th point. مقدار الواجب في عروض التجارة ربع العشر. What is compulsory for you to pay as zakah after valuing and everything is a tenth of a quarter, 1/40. That's 2.5%, just like for money. So I just gave some examples, here on how to do that. So, alhamdulillah, we all know how to do math. So it's just 2.5%. Now, over here, it says the scholars differ. اختلف العلماء في زكاة عروض. The scholars differ with respect to how do you pay the zakah on urud at-tijara. هل يجوز إخراجها عرضا أو is it permissible for you to pay the zakah as the items that you are selling من نفس العروض أم لابد أن تكون من القيمة, or you are to pay from the value? Are you to pay for, I'm selling mangoes, and I'll total everything. I have 100 mangoes. Mangoes. Am I to pay zakah as 2.5 mangoes? Or I'm to look at the total, the value of my 100 mangoes, and I'll pay 2.5% of the in money of the value of those 100 mangoes. There's difference opinion amongst the scholars. Some say you pay out of the items, you pay 2.5 mangoes in our example. Some say you pay in value. Some choose a middle course, and Allahu A'lam, that is the more correct opinion. They choose a middle course and see which one will be beneficial to the recipients, the fuqara, the masakin, amilina alayha, and all that. They are going to receive the zakah and will not hurt the zakat givers. Because remember, when the Prophet ﷺ was sending Mu'adh to collect zakah in Yemen, he said, Dad, فَاتَّقُوا دَعْوَةَ الْمَظْلُومِ, and fear the da'wah, the curse of the oppressed. Because when you are unjust to him and he curses you, there's no hijab between his curse and Allah. So we ask you to collect zakah for him, not to hurt him. The intention is to purify him. خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا. Take from their wealth zakah to purify him, to purify them, not to hurt them. We don't intend to hurt them. So the zakat institution is to see if the person is giving it himself, he knows what will hurt him and what won't. So, and he can even do beyond what is required, as in the man who gave a higher value camel than was required of him. The Prophet ﷺ didn't want to take it, but a man insisted, so the Prophet ﷺ accepted it from him and made dua for him. So the man will know that there will be no problem in that case. But if it's a third party, a zakat institution that is taking it now, Allahu A'lam, the position of the scholars who choose a middle course is that what will be beneficial to the recipients and not hurt the givers is the way to go. And that is the position of Imam Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah. Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah. Imam ibn Taymiyyah, this was position, and several other scholars too. And the reason for this is clear. If I'm selling cement, for instance, and nails, the iron nails, what benefits are the recipients going to get from that? I value, the cement I'm selling. I have 100 bags of cement, and I give them 2.5. I give out 2.5 bags of cement to the fuqara. Is it going to eat it or what? It's not going to be of benefit to him. I add nails of equal measure to that, 2.5% of my nails to that. It's not going to benefit from it. So if anything, we are giving him an added task of going to go and sell it. And when such things happen, we know what's going to be the consequence of that. People are going to buy it off him at giveaway prices. So he won't get benefit out of that. We won't end up removing what we intended to remove through the zakah. When you give to the fuqara and the masakin, you want to enrich them and remove them from that category. Now, so then on the side of the giver, we don't want to hurt him. How can we hurt him? Okay. A bag of, let's say he's selling, let's use the same bag of cement. If we count it as 100 bags of cement that he owns and it reaches the nisab, selling 100 bags of cement and reaches the nisab in value or exceeds that, and we take 2.5% of that, 2.5, the value of 2.5% of cement is not necessarily the value, is not necessarily equal to 2.5% of the value of 2.5 of 100% of the cement. I.e., We say, okay, what is the value of all these 100%, all these 100 bags of cement? And we get it. 2.5%, and we say, okay, pay zakat on 2.5% of that value. That's one option. The second option, we say, bring 2.5 bags of your cement. If we look at the price of 2.5 bags of cement, it may be more on some items than 2.5% of the whole 100 in monetary value. And it will also be the other way around. That one being more expensive than this. Depends on the items. If I'm selling watches, for instance, gold watches, and the 2.5, and I value the 100 watches that I have, and I pay 2.5% of them. That 2.5, the value is not necessarily the same as the value of 2.5 watches. So, therefore, Allahu A'lam, the middle course on that is what might be, the way to go. Says, وذكر الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية أيضا في اختيارات فقه ويجوز إخراج الزكاة العروض عرضا. He said it is permissible to pay out of what you are selling of عروض التجارة ويقوى على قول من يقول يجب زكاة في عين المال. And this statement would, buttress the position of those who say you have to pay, from what you are, from what you are selling. And he said something the opposite also to show that he was he chose a middle course on this. Says, okay, وذكر الشيخ الإسلام في فتاوى الكبرى, in his book فتاوى الكبرى الأقوال في المسألة يجوز مطلقا لا يجوز مطلقا. Some scholars says it's permissible, someone saying it's not permissible, i.e. are you to pay in based on the value? Some say yes, some say no. Are you to pay out of the item, not the value? Some say yes, some say no. يجوز في بعض الصور للحاجة أو مصلحة الراجحة. The Sheikh rahimahullah says that it depends on the maslaha al-rajiha, the benefit that is to be derived. If you want to pay in based on the value, or you want to pay based on the number of the items, it depends on the maslaha to the recipients and to the givers. Now, so the teacher, one of the teachers of Sheikh Ibn Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen, Imam al-Sa'di, he said, والصحيح جواز الدفع زكاة العروض من عروض لأن زكاة مواساة فلا يكلفها من غير ماله. Or is of the opinion that you only pay from the urud. But let's we go with the position of Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah on this, because it will depend on both. And Allahu A'lam. It depends on what is beneficial in both cases. What's the time? I think we'll stop here because it's a new section. The zakah on al-ashum and as-sanadat. The zakah on shares that you own in a company and bonds. How are you going to pay the zakah on them and all that? So inshallah, we'll go through that if Allah spares our lives next week. Let us remember what we have learned, in this class and previous ones. The most important of all these things that as we keep saying, is application. And we will not be able to apply anything if we do not remember, what we are to do based on what we learned. So we should remember them, we should revise them. We should jot down important points. We can't, memorize all the information, but we can jot down the most important, points that will guide the actions that we do. From what you talked about, or all the tijara, there isn't anybody except that at one point in time or the other, he sold something or he is selling something currently. So these things affect us. They're not esoteric things that don't affect us. They do affect us. And even in cases where we're not currently selling something, we will be able to use that information to assist and guide people who are currently selling something or intend to do so. Now, so do we have any question? Okay. Barakallahu feek. Fikum. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.